Today you join me down here on the banks of Ashman's Worthy Pools once again. We're meeting up with Simon Pomeroy, the owner of Pallatrax, where this time we're going to be talking a bit more in depth about bait. So Simon, thank you again for having me down here at Ashman's Worthy Pools, and hopefully once again I'll catch some more fish later on, but first we've got to get some filming done. It seems that every time I come down the weather's pretty grotty. Is this a local thing?
It's been gorgeous until you turned up again. So no, it's been a miserable summer so far, but fishing weather this is, come on, be positive.
Let's get this done then, get the rods out. So we'll talk a bit more about bait company. Obviously everyone knows you through your grips and the stones, but something that a lot of people may not know is you've actually got your own bait company as well. So where did that come about?
That's the irony actually in the Pallatrax story today. I mean, the bait came before anything else. And it's not the happiest story. I owned a fishery in Dorset called Paddington Lakes, and we had a major fish kill there. And I really started, and it's one of the reasons why I am, and the philosophy of Pallatrax as it is, it really kind of focused on all this bait was going in. You know, that's why we didn't know what it was made of, where it come from, was it good for the fish and things like that. And so I started doing quite a bit of research, and a lot of it wasn't, I was finding things weren't regulated. There was lots of different kind of grey areas. And the way I thought I would combat and actually do more than just an angling bait, create a fishery tool, which I'll talk about in a bit later, but something that was good, but was great for the anglers. So really good baits, highest quality I could make it all ourselves. People came to the fishery, fish were hungry for it because it was food, so they were on it. So the anglers were catching, they were happy. And also it was very much about creating good water quality. So what passed through the fish, or when their baits broke down, they actually weren't harmful in any way. So it's very much a bit of a twin-pronged attack, where it's a fishery management tool foremost, but also the angler then benefits by it being what it is.
So you got into it through, as you said, from a fairly negative point of the view of the fish kill, but how did you then learn what was going to be good for the fish? How did you learn the trade?
Again, it's a grey area, massive grey area. You know, we're talking 25 years ago now, and it still is probably a much grey area when I look at it. But I actually sat back and said, who can I go to? Who can I really talk to about what is good for a fish and what is good for a fishery, water quality? And to be quite honest, the fish farmers are the people I went to. And I learned so much about fish biology, started, you know, even bringing fish on myself. And understanding what they needed in their diet, what they wanted to have in their diet, not what we wanted them to, if that makes sense. So it was very much focused on going to people who were right at the top of their game and really focused on healthy weight gain. And one of the other things was, I was again reiterating, whatever passes through the fish, I want it still to be a healthy food source to some degree for bacteria and things like that. So it was very much about putting it all in one package. And I honestly don't think anybody else has done it, and sometimes I do question why, because the first point of fish safety to me is making sure that we look after their water quality in the home they live within.
So is this why you referred to your bait as more of a fishery management tool than an angler's bait?
Very much so. I wanted to design baits that worked in harmony for both the angler, so like I said, giving them the highest quality I can make. And also the fact is that if you came to my fishery, you were going to help me together, because we want bigger fish, we want healthier fish to fight and all those kind of things. So you were going to help me by using these baits that were just incredibly good value. The fish were on them. We were all pre-baiting for each other, which was brilliant as well. And that's been the story. So it works very much for me as a fishery owner, but also, you know, it's not default, because it's by design, but excellent quality baits catch more fish.
There's no denying that baits from all different manufacturers and companies do catch fish still. You can't deny that, but you called me out earlier and what do I know what goes into my bait? And the honest answer is no, and that's probably the same with a lot of people. So why do you think it's so important that we should understand what's in our bait?
I think it's two reasons. I'll take the first, which might not necessarily be something that people would highlight. Probably if they had the knowledge they would, is whatever your bait is, because it's all about the ingredients, but whatever it is and it goes into water in copious amounts, it's going to have some reaction. That's just a fact. So if we're putting fish safety and water quality right at the top, that's one reason we need to know what goes into bait. Are we actually not harming the environment with fishing? Because like you rightly say, fish will pick up all kinds of stuff. I've caught loads of fish on flavour cork balls, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a food item, it can be a lure item to catch a fish. So then on the other side of the coin is, do we want to go and fish with total confidence? Do we want to know, yes, we've got all these other areas of angling, we've got to apply watercraft, etc. But do we want to know that the bit on the end is something that they're attracted to, that they will pick up? Because they're obviously not eating it, because on a hair, you know, it's all wrapped around a hook or whatever. But if they're picking it up and it's signalling all those things that are genuine food source, and that's what I think where we kind of prove the point, the amount of fish we're catching time and time again, because they're on the baits. You know, not just at this fishery, if you look at all the other fisheries like the Quille being a prime example in France, you know, if you give fish something that they need in their diet and they actually want, you're likely to catch more. So it's kind of like I say, there's a fish safety element, water quality element, and as an angler, I want to have total confidence I've got a selection of bait that's going to help me catch more fish through the food content of it and the actual design of it. Like I say, it's all about the ingredients.
Now, what's the importance then with species-specific products? Because we're talking very heavily about carp, but does this transfer over to other species? And can you use things like trout pellets, is often used in carp fishing? What's your opinions on that?
Again, you know, I'm quite happy to stick my head above the parapet. If you look at trout pellet, and I made this mistake with halibut pellet, trout pellet. Used to row out in one of my lakes and dump over a sack of trout pellet, used to get all this oil all over the lake, and I think this was brilliant. And then I started this journey after the fish kill, and I was reading up and researching that, you know, carp with a digestive tract can't deal with trout pellet in copious amounts. It's like bad McDonald's for them. It's not healthy. Don't get me wrong, fish will get caught on it, huge attraction, but anything with an oil content over 15%. And I think the thing that really gives the clue is it's actually called trout pellet. So it's been designed for trout. It's like saying I'm going to feed a pig sheep pellet, you know, just because it's got 4 hoofs kind of thing. And that's what, so I really started drilling down again into the ingredients. And of course, I don't believe small amounts of trout pellets in a small pick bag or something like that would have a detrimental effect. It's when you're putting loads and loads. Halibut pellet, you know, it's designed for a sea fish. Why are we using it in coarse fishing, kind of the coarse fishing arena? It doesn't actually make any sense.
So following on from it being a fishery management tool, you talk about your baits being useful for the whole biomass of a lake. Can you expand upon that a bit more?
Yeah, I think this is, you know, this is one of the massive benefits for me and other fishery owners. If what you're putting in there as an angler, we know fish feed on cycles. They're not definitely going to eat your bait all the time. There's lots of things going in. But what there is thousands of different insects and life forms in the fishery. So if those baits are breaking down and they've got a content which is beneficial for the invertebrate life, etc., you're almost like these baits are helping you to fertilize the biomass. So if you've got healthier invertebrate life, fatter invertebrate life, that's something better for the fish to feed on as well as a natural food source. We'll never as anglers, whatever we think, we'll never beat the nutritional and protein and the want of naturals. So if we can also feed them, so it's also something that's happening in the background. And it's been a prime example here of Ashmansworthy pools, just to see that what we're doing, and you see like things traveling into the bait, whether it's snails or whether it's other critters, and they're eating it. So it's one of those win-win situations. So everything's catered for.
Now I understand that all bait companies should actually be animal feed registered. So what is that to start with? And I'm hoping you're going to say yes. I'm guessing that's why the question's here. Are you animal feed registered?
Yeah, and I think we should. It's something that the industry needs to be highlighting. In recent years, through trading standards, through DEFRA, we're getting basically advice, and the advice is like any kind of almost pet industry where we need to be animal feed registered. So basically they have criteria, certainly about dyes and things like that, that we need to obviously be complying for fish safety. It's all about fish safety, water quality safety. So yes, we were one of the first companies. I mean, to be fair, we've always followed that trend of making sure everything is as good as we can possibly put into our baits for all the right reasons. So yes, every good bait company, I would suggest, any bait company that's retailing bait, they should be animal feed registered.
Now, despite the fact that everyone should be animal feed registered, I'm sure there are some companies out there that aren't, but you also said a few times that not all baits are created equal. What do you mean by that?
Again, it's It's a bit of a strange one. Sometimes I find it hard to articulate, but just because a bait is red, round and smells of strawberries, it's the actual ingredients, as I keep on harking on about, that makes the mass. So, you know, I'm not saying flavour, I'm not saying colour, but they're very low percentages of the actual mass. So if one bait looks the same and one bait looks similar, it doesn't mean they're the same. They might both be red, both baits smell of strawberries, but it's actually the ingredient, the whole makeup of that bait. So just because it smells the same and looks the same, it doesn't mean it is the same, because it's all about what's inside, what it's made of.
Now, we're not just at your fishery at the moment as well, one of the lovely lakes behind, but I understand the factory is on site as well, where you make all of this bait as well.
Yeah, I learned the hard lesson, I suppose, about total quality control. You know, I suppose I look at this fishery and I look at all fisheries, it's like a fish tank. And we've got to make sure that if you've got a fish tank, for you, Curly, if you had a fish tank or a pond in the back of your garden, right, full of some really expensive koi, would you let strangers come up and just throw stuff in there? I would suggest you probably wouldn't. And that's no different. I think that's a right of a fishery owner. I know some anglers will probably say, well, that's not fair. But if we didn't look after the fish and the water quality, we wouldn't have the fisheries. So there is that kind of, you know, that ideal behind it all. So obviously to keep that total quality control, and also I love making bait. I think it's really quite cool to create something that you then catch fish, and other people are going all over the country or abroad catching fish. You know, what we're doing in France or Canada or Holland, I get a sense of satisfaction. I prefer people catching on the gear than me catching on it, in all honesty. So yeah, everything, I created what I call my super kitchen, because I want it to have a standard of cleanliness and everything right up. Yeah, I suffer from OCD, so that helps as well. But the fact is, if we're going to put stuff into the water systems, we need it to be the best, and also the manufacturing process to be the best. And I need to take it from making it from scratch. Everything's made from scratch, taking it through the whole process, and knowing that when it leaves here, not only can anglers be really confident in it, but also I'm confident it's helping in the general environment, as we've mentioned, around the fish and management tool aspects.
So going back to the actual bait quality, what makes a bait poor, or what makes a poor quality bait?
It's physically the ingredients. I can give you an example. I was asked at one stage to commit, it's a company that doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not telling tales or anything like that, but I was asked to make some ground bait once for a company. They sent me the recipe because I got the machines to make, I'm really into my ground baits, and they sent me the recipe. It was 49% dog biscuit meal, 49% breadcrumb, 1% fish meal, 1% flavour powder. I wouldn't want that going in my waters, but it looked the part, it smelt the part, and that's the thing. It's all about what it's made of, and if it's made of poor quality ingredients, it's got no food value to the fish, that is a bad bait. It's bad for the anglers because their confidence cannot be high, knowing it's just on a cheap lure. It might smell lovely, it might look nice and glistening and all that kind of stuff, but it's all about those ingredients. And so a poor quality bait will basically be something that's bulked out with poor quality ingredients that have no right to be in water systems.
So you make all your baits on site from scratch, you enjoy doing it, and starting at the very start of the recipe is something as simple as fresh eggs. Why do you still use that, and why do you think that's so important in a bait mix?
I will always believe, until proven differently, that I'm doing things as best as I know. And without a shadow of doubt, fresh eggs, though they've doubled in price to me in recent years, creates not just the binder we need to make a boilie with, but also creates an addition of protein, real protein. Now, if you think about it, in nature, what doesn't eat egg? It's full of protein. So I use it both as a food stimulant, food source, if you want to call it that, and also the best quality binder you can get. I'm not into these synthetic binders or any synthetic kind of elements whatsoever.
Now, of course, using fresh ingredients and all the top quality ingredients you can get, that's going to have a massive knock-on effect with the price. But so in today's day and age, can you blame the angler for maybe thinking, well, cheaper will be fine? Or do you really think that quality is going to shine through regardless?
I think cream always floats to the top at the end of the day. And I think more and more fishery owners, especially now, are being more inquisitive about what baits are made from. I feel sorry for the angler when they're buying something of such, poor value, setting aside the kind of environmental implications for the water quality. The fact is that, yes, we know fish will, like I say, I've caught thousands of fish on a popped up cork ball on the surface and things like that. So they will pick up, they're inquisitive, they will try things, they will mouth things. So you'll always be, picking up fish on poor quality baits, but you will catch more on better quality baits, I would say. The way I look at it, and this is obviously just from Pallatrax's point of view, and I'm sure, like I say, there's some other great bait companies out there, though, we're more of a biomass food source producer, for want of a better. But like I say, great bait companies out there, but it is all about the ingredients, and it's almost like the fairy up liquid kind of dilemma. You pay more for fairy up liquid, you can get a much cheaper thing from the local supermarket, and it's kind of diluted completely. So you're better off paying for something that's more concentrated, using less of it, because that's a very important aspect in fishing. We don't really think when it goes in, are we feeding the fish up? How much does it take to feed the fish up? It's quite a complex topic, especially when people say, I'm fishing over 10 kilo of bait, and you go, well, what is that 10 kilo made of? And they don't know. So is it good? Is it bad? Is it too much? Is it, all these kind of variable questions come into it. But it is the whole bait thing is a very complicated subject, and because we're not severely regulated, I can see anglers, like I say, tough times out there going for cheapest, but sometimes I would suggest cheap is not as good. I just look at my kids' shoes, and we buy these nice flash shoes, and within 2 months the sole's fallen off. They look all right, but what are they? Are they really any good quality? And it ends up being false economy, in all honesty.
Unfortunately, at the moment, everything is still going up, and so people are feeling the pinch, so you can see why they might opt for maybe a cheaper alternative. But with the prices of raw ingredients going up and the bait manufacturing costs going up, how will this impact you? And will you be forced to use any bulking agents?
No, I will never do it. I'm not going to do it from kind of a holistic point of view. It would be totally hypocritical, totally wrong. At the end of the day, if I have to put my prices up and I keep them as low as I possibly can, I can assure you, if you see the kind of handmade elements and how we're doing stuff, we don't do huge batch runs, we do small runs, so make sure anglers get the best quality bait we can. I'm never going to do it. I'd rather stop the whole thing overnight. What we'll do is we will just have to pass on increases, not an increase. What really frustrates you at the moment, you see people passing on increases. This is nothing to do with the fishing industry necessarily, but they're passing on increases and a profit. So at the end of the day, if something goes up 10% to me, I'm going to have to put it into the mix, and it will have to go up 10%. But at the end of the day, I do believe you pay for what you get as well. So I've got no problem with that. It's a shame that I have to do it, but it's certainly, I'm not going to sit there and go, well, I'm going to have to cut my ingredients now and use a bulking agent, which is going to be detrimental to everything I stand for. So no, it's not going to happen.
Now, there's a common belief that freezer baits are always going to be better than shelf lives. Is that true?
No. And again, just reiterating, it's all about the ingredients. If a shelf life bait has great ingredient profile, does, high nutrition, all the benefits we're talking about, what bait should do for both angler and the environment. But just because, I see this lots of times where people say, all shelf life baits are banned, freezer baits only. But what if the freezer bait is made of poor ingredients? What if it's just a shelf life bait that's been frozen? So again, just because it's cold does not give it a badge of saying this is a good quality bait. Far from it. It's about the ingredients yet again.
So shelf life or freezer baits aside, some baits last longer than others, and others just seem to blow is the term that's used. Why do some baits last and others come and then go very quickly?
I'm convinced, absolutely convinced, and this is through fishery ownership more than my own angling, is it goes in the water. I've seen it before. It goes into the water, people start catching fish on it, and then it starts to tail off very quickly. And the only reason I believe is because it's not food. And they very quickly realise fish, if it's not a food source, they're not going to eat it. And that is what happens. We've seen that, we've done our own tests over the years and things like that. And it's just complete common sense, isn't it? If I gave you, my analogy has always been, if I had this lovely wax apple, it looked the part, smelt the part, I gave it to you and you took a bite out of it, you're not going to carry on going back and biting it again. And when you're thinking about fish, they have to feed to survive. And when they're feeding, they're actually, using energy. So they need to, at the very least, replace the energy they're using. And so they don't eat something that's not food. Just because the human mentality is saying it's a bait, therefore it must be food. Well, if it's not food, fish won't eat it. And that's why bait blows.
Now, you've long been known for someone that creates baits in different shapes, namely the squabs. Why have you made them in that shape, and do you think it makes a difference?
Yes, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, I wouldn't do it else, to be fair. I don't fish on round baits, and I haven't for over 20 years. And the reason is, it's the machinery makes them round. So it's a topic from debate. We could all sit there over a pint and have a chat about it. But at the end of the day, round baits are made round because of the machinery, because it's the most economical way to produce the shape. Okay, it's not for throwing sticks. Throwing sticks weren't made, and then we made boilies. So the more I looked at it, the more, again, looking at how fish can learn from association. If everybody, you know, I'm trying to talk tiny little variables here. If a fish, an individual fish, has been caught on something round time and time again and can detect that, we don't know because we can't ask them the question, why do I want to fish on that shape? And also I started looking at shapes of the round shape underwater. You look at the front of a submarine, for example, it's round because it displaces water. Yeah. So do I want to fish spitting something out, hoping to hook it on the anti-eject, which is going to travel the fastest underwater, has smooth sides, so nothing to hang it up on. So there was no reason other than the basic economy of scale, I suppose, where it's cheaper to make round shapes. The machinery is there to produce round shapes. It all comes from like the sweet market historically and things like that. So it was then a question of, right, if I'm going to sit there and design a shape, what shape can I produce? And you think, well, square would be good. And you think, well, how the hell am I going to, you know, make square baits and things like that? But I developed a way to making the squabs, so you end up with 4 corners. And that gives me the advantages of, I'm not now worried about cross association of a round bait. I've got 4 corners, so when it is ejecting, it's moving, it's oscillating in the mouth, more chance of a hang up. And also when you're fishing on, like in rivers, when we're fishing for barbel or carp or whatever species, it doesn't roll away, it ledges in, and also you can put it on ledges. So it doesn't roll down the banks of fisheries. So if you're fishing, you know, steep margins, it's more likely to hold up. So there's a design behind the whole concept. And it's interesting now because it was something that was poo-pooed and lots of people said, oh, here's Pallatrax, they've gimmicked something. There was never a gimmick. I don't do gimmick. And now seeing some of the what I call major accredited bait companies are now actually replicating and stating for all the reasons I've stated. So, you know what they say, copy is best form of flattery. So, but there is a design behind the shape, and they're a nightmare to make, and they probably cost me twice as much time to make as in the physical making through the machines. It's not an easy process, but if you're going to end up with a benefit at the end of the day, let's put performance over profit and get it right. So that's why squabs are there.
Now, that being said, you do still do some round baits because most of us still use them. Some of us still like to use a throwing stick. But one of the ranges is the Multiworm. What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, obviously, yeah, we still make round baits. You know, people want round baits, and at the end of the day, when I design something, I very much design it for my own fishing. And if people then, and I have my conclusions, and if people want to migrate to them, fantastic. If not, so we obviously supply round baits. And I'm not saying fish don't get caught on round baits. I'm just looking at all these tiny edges. Multiworm is, I've always been into natural baits. I think a lot of it came from my fly fishing, early days of fly fishing, when you start to think of entomology and you start to learn about all the different insects, and we're talking thousands of waterborne species of fly. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. The inspiration about Multiworm basically came from, I don't really know how to explain this without sounding, but you're creating something that will rot. Okay, and in nature, things will eat rotting things. So if I infuse a high quality base mix with a load of natural attractant, so with Multiworm, we're talking silkworm, mealworm and earthworm. And if I then take, when I'm making baits, everything gets ground to a dust. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, it emulsifies quicker. Okay, so it gets out, so it leaks out. And secondly, it's easier for a fish to digest. So if you're putting out a bait that isn't using a flavour as an attractor, it's actually using death as an attractor, if that makes sense. That's where Multiworm comes from, and that's why how I have to use naturals. It makes sense to it, and in all honesty, it's an enigma to some, because they'll smell. We all do it. We're all as guilty as we'll open up a bag of bacon, and I call it the flawed sniff test. We'll go, oh, that's lovely, or oh, I don't like that one, you know, and it smells really like a wet dog. Multiworm. It's an unobtrusive kind of grey colour, but it's just packed with basically dead insect life, which we know, like silkworm is a massive attractor for carp and things like that. So you incorporate it in a bait, it's breaking down once you put it in the water, so that's why it's literally sending out all of these signals, and so the fish aren't homing in on a flavour in this particular case, they're homing in on what the bait is made of.
Now, Multiworm's not the only bait range you've got. The other one, or one of the other ones, is jungle bait. Why do you think this remained so effective for so long?
Again, it's just the ingredients. You know, it's when I had Paddington, it was the first bait I developed, so I got a bit of a soft spot for it. And it's tiger nut and peanut flavour with other attractors on a milk protein base, because we only do HNV, we don't do shelf life baits. It's like all the baits, wherever they go, if it's offering a food source and the right attractors, why would it stop working? You know, and that's why we don't keep on bringing out lots and lots of different baits. Why? You know, we've got crave, we've got multiworm, we've got jungle. I'm working on several at the moment. As we've grown, it allows me to expand the bait range, not just for the sake of bringing out another bait. I'm not interested in doing that. I want to bring out something else. And there's several things I'm mucking around going forward, which are all designed to give us more edges, but designed to stay at that high quality.
So you've kind of touched upon it there, but what does the future hold for Pallatrax baits?
Pallatrax generally, it's growing massively. And I do genuinely thank everybody that supports the brand, because it's been a fantastic, you know, people who are involved with the brand, or the team members, or just the general anglers who are supporting us. Where we'll go now, and we've got a blank canvas. We're a multi-species company. You know, I like catfish, I like match fishing, I like sea fishing. There's all kinds of things we can do going forward. With baits, I think, like I say, I don't think you can almost run out of ideas when you're really looking at it from the natural element, combinations of different things, you know, like maggots or worms, or you can go on. And because we're, you know, we've got the sources where we can bring in things like gamma shrimp. I'm a massive fan of gamma shrimp, and I'm mucking around with that at the moment. So there's lots of things we're doing. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do more flavour baits, because flavours, without a shadow of work. So one day we'll do a film and I'll show you when I'm fly fishing with a cork, and it's a flavoured piece of cork, and how fish will move through 50 chummy mixers and nail that piece of cork. And that's because it's just sensing the flavour through its olfactory system. So it's a blank canvas. It's exciting. You know, there's things I want to do, you know, whether it's barbel fishing or even whether it's sea fishing. Some of the stuff I've got on the pipeline, sea fishing is quite cool as well. But with carp, we're just going to keep to that level, high food source, and amalgamate different naturals is a massive thing. And also amalgamate naturals with flavours. And all our flavours, we blend them here, so they're what we want. We've got a great facility here at Ashmansworthy Pools now. Having our own fishery to test baits on is a massive advantage as well. So yeah, it's just exciting. I'm buzzing, and everybody around us is buzzing that we're growing. What we're doing with you guys is putting the story out more, so at least people can, you know, they can judge, they can be more judgmental about the conclusions. They don't have to agree with me, of course, but, you know, I've got no hidden agenda. We're totally transparent. We're doing it, and it's all come always full circle. It started, unfortunately, with a fish kill, and we're doing what we're doing now, where we've never, ever sold our soul to Satan throughout that journey. We never will. We'll just keep on innovating, developing, and hopefully anglers will keep on gravitating towards us.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much again for your time talking through bait. I'm sure there's lots more you've got ticking away in your head that you could have said, but I think you've got a few extra bags of multiworms somewhere, so we can get some rods out as well.
I'm sure we can squirrel a couple of baits out for you and your colleague here, Joe, and you get fishing now. We're finishing this filming, so you've caught on it before. I'm sure you'll catch on it again.